Hello, listeners. Today, we are releasing another episode for Cybersecurity Awareness Month as part of our series, The Haunted House of APIs, sponsored by our friends Traceable. In this series, we are building awareness around APIs, their security risks, and what you can do about it. Traceable AI is building one platform to secure every API so you can discover, protect, and test all your APIs with contextual security, enabling organizations to minimize risk and maximize the value APIs bring to their customers. Today's episode is titled Phantom Threats, the Ghost Haunting Your API Security, with Adam Arellano. API security threats often go unnoticed, hiding like ghosts in your infrastructure. Bots, sophisticated fraud attempts, account takeovers, and attackers disguising themselves within legitimate traffic. These all pose risk to your organization and can bypass traditional security measures, wreaking havoc without detection until it's too late. Adam is a tech advisor and global CISO with Traceable and will guide listeners through the world of phantom threats, haunting API security. Well, Adam, thank you for being on the show today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into our topic today, which is phantom threats, the ghost haunting your API security, tell me and my audience a little more about you.
Right now, I am a technology advisor at Traceable, an API security company. I started out as a customer of Traceable in actually a couple different places and aware of them for a while. But the reason why I came on as a technology advisor is because I really believe in the platform, the way they're approaching it. It's always nice to work with people that you like, and the team is great at Traceable. Spent some time at PayPal, have done a startup that was focused on foster care and adoption. Prior to that, some artificial intelligence work. And I started my career out of uniform at Salesforce, running their compliance. Prior to that, 14 years in the Marine Corps. It was difficult, but fun. And I don't miss it, but it was great.
Well, thank you for your service. I appreciate that very, very much.
Appreciate you saying it.
Sounds like you've had a career at some really big names, and now you've landed at a fantastic company with Traceable. Tell me about you outside of technology. What do you do for fun?
So this is a fun question because everybody tries to get at my hobbies, and I tell them I've got 6 kids from the ages of 22 down to 8. And my hobbies consist of either feeding or driving around 6 kids, plus a pretty high power wife that I also try to keep up with. So there have been times in my life where I practiced MMA, a lot of jujitsu, a lot of kickboxing, but mostly these days, driving kids, feeding kids, and playing with APIs.
Well, very cool. Let's dive into our topic today. Again, the topic for today's episode is phantom threats, the ghost haunting your API security. What in the world are phantom threats, right? In the context of API security, and how do they go undetected?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. Because of the time of year and also because of recent movie releases, I've been spending time watching some horror films and also horror comedy like Beetlejuice. And phantom threats are basically things that are dangerous to you that you're not aware of or that you can't see directly. Specifically, when we talk about APIs, the very existence of APIs for some enterprises, some companies, is a phantom threat because they're not even aware that they have APIs that affect their security. Even in very sophisticated companies, while they're aware that there are some APIs, they definitely don't know how many and what is traversing those APIs or who can see them. It's like a double threat of, even if you know about APIs, you don't know exactly what's there in most cases. And if you do know what's there, you don't always know exactly how you're vulnerable with those APIs.
So it's a double whammy there, and it's super hidden and it can be super threatening. Okay, so there's this this idea of exploiting APIs, right, through fraud attempts or botnets. Can you explain how both of those things exploit APIs while blending into legitimate traffic, right? That's got to be one of the hardest things to see. It looks like legit traffic, and then all of a sudden, bam, you're exploited. Tell me a little bit about that.
There's basically 3 parts to this, and it's difficult for me to go back over the last 2 years of breaches and breach reports to find a breach that didn't somehow involve this question of botnets, API exploitation, and using APIs that are unprotected to exfiltrate data. To start with, the days of, the 1990s hacker film where they're pounding away at a keyboard, looking really cool as they work on getting inside a company, those days are not really around anymore. Most of the time, what's happening with attackers is that they're logging in directly using stolen credentials. Stolen credentials are basically you stealing the means that a system has for identifying who you are. So if you have my house key, for example, you can just use my house key to get into my house, regardless of the fact that you aren't me. So when an attacker has credentials that are valid, they don't need to break into anything. They just log in. And what's been happening is that those attackers have been using botnets basically to hide the volume of traffic that comes out. If there's a attacker that wants to exfiltrate an entire database of an entire company's, user set, they can't just take it out the front door all at once, because they'll notice like, oh, there's tons of gigabytes flowing across a network from one endpoint to another. That doesn't seem right. That's easy to catch. So what the botnets are doing is they're taking and stealing 8, 9, 10 records at a time that look like normal traffic, using a valid credential and getting away with it because nobody notices those things. It's the difference between breaking in the front door of a bank or a jewelry store and just taking everything all at once, or surreptitiously taking one thing at a time as different people flow through. The end result's the same. You lose a lot of diamonds, money, or customer records. But the way that it's done is so much less noticeable when it's done in small parts over time with an entire botnet using automation.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. It's like someone disappearing in a crowd, kind of, and the crowd is moving in a certain direction there. And with credentials, there's not this kind of flashy hacker event happening, right? It's just someone logging in. And are you saying they're just stealing bits at a time, almost like stealing a car one part at a time? Do you have a real world example of where this caused significant damage? I know you mentioned sifting through the many events you've observed over the past few years. Tell me about maybe a real world example where there's been significant damage.
Significant damage is kind of hard to measure, right? Especially when we're talking about exfiltrating data. Data by itself is power. It's also currency. That's what most companies these days who are big tech companies actually transact in. Not as much dollars and cents, but actually in data. So when you talk about the damage done, I can't count how many times I've received a letter from a bank, a service, or some website that I've signed up for that says, hey, your information was stolen. And in each of those cases, to me, I'm like, okay, another time that my information's been stolen, which in small terms isn't a big deal. But in the long run, what basically is happening, that entire profile of my personal information is being built on the dark web by these things. For example, and I'll go back a little bit further. There was a point in time where LinkedIn provided an API where you could go through and in an automated fashion, basically scrape all the data from every profile that existed on LinkedIn that was set to public, which the whole point of having LinkedIn is that it is set to public because other people can find you for work, for advice, etc. Well, what this led to was an entire database basically of what LinkedIn had that established a profile of everybody with a job that required a professional presence. Eventually, they secured that API so that that kind of scraping wasn't possible. However, the damage was already done. Now what happens? Anytime that somebody posts on their LinkedIn profile in public that they've changed jobs, attackers can now correlate that job change along with their contact information that's already been scraped and say, okay, this person now went from working at, for my example, for me, I went from working at PayPal to working at Traceable. And so that correlation is drawn. My email address is out there. And also you can kind of get the sense that, if my name is Adam Arellano, then my email address is probably adam.arellano at whatever company I am. And so what happens is they already have my name, they have my contact information, they have now the company that I work at because I announced it. And then the one last piece of information they grab automatically is, who's the CEO? Who does that person likely report to? And so every day since I started at Traceable about 3.5, 4 weeks ago, I've gotten an email from the CEO that says, Adam, I need to talk to you. This is super important. And it's an automated email based on that API scraping that was happening. That's from somebody that looks like the CEO, but it's not the CEO asking me to provide my phone number. This has happened in every company I've been in since probably 2019. And I even had users when I was at a particular company who responded to these messages thinking it was a CEO and ultimately were asked to go buy gift cards so the CEO could hand them out as prizes during a workshop or something, and ended up losing $4,000 or $5,000 in gift cards to these attackers. And what's really fascinating about this is that up until the point you're sharing the gift card numbers, everything behind that was automated, not a single person involved. And that's kind of the state we're at. And that's why, scraping these massive amounts of information from different websites from insecure APIs is so dangerous and damaging, not just to the company that got owned, but also to the customers of that company and other companies that are related to it.
Wow, that's amazing and scary and
kind of funny as well.
And kind of funny. It is kind of humorous, but it ends in spending real money sending gift cards to automated emails. That's wild. And then you go into the data side of things, with transacting in data. So people are stealing people's real information. Interesting and scary. What makes detecting these sort of threats so challenging? And I could probably pluck a few things from what you said and the automation and the representation as the CEO, but why are these hard to detect? And, why do these traditional security measures often fail?
When you think about it, most of the time, these APIs or these automations are doing exactly what the programmers or the company asked them to do. So the one for LinkedIn was specifically so that you could automate reach out emails for sales reasons or for recruiting reasons. So it was actually doing what it was designed to do, which makes it very difficult to know, what are the consequences of these decisions. If you look at the OWASP top 10 of API security problems, which is a very fascinating thing to look into, the majority of those actually are not hard security things where it's really difficult. You got to get the right encryption, et cetera. Most of them are business logic decisions that are poorly made. So, for example, the most common is the broken object level authorization, or BOLA. That particular issue is basically that you haven't thought to restrict which objects you have authorization to. So once you get authorized to an API, you're supposed to go grab the thing that you're supposed to go grab, but you can also move laterally and grab something else. It's kind of like somebody at the front of a grocery store, lets you in. They ask you at the front door, okay, what are you going to get? Well, I need 2 jars of peanut butter. Don't ask me why. Here's $5. And they're like, okay, go get your 2 jars of peanut butter. And now I'm in the door of an entire grocery store. And if I'm honest, I'll just go grab peanut butter. But if I'm not, and if I'm somebody else that has other intent, I can go grab all the steak, Cheez-Its, Oreos, anything else I want besides just the peanut butter. Somebody's just at the front door checking, what you want. Nobody's in there to make sure that you're grabbing the right things. When it comes to, stopping these attacks, it really requires not just an awareness of what you're building intentionally, but what the other effects of those decisions are.
Well, that makes total sense. Okay, so obviously this is hard to detect. There's a real problem here, and it's happening, and people are being affected by it. What are the best strategies or, tech that teams can adopt, businesses can adopt to detect and eliminate these? There's got to be a way that we can protect ourselves from these sort of things before they cause harm.
Most of the companies that sell API security out there, they do a great job of protecting the front door of the grocery store, right? They're like, we will tell you exactly who's coming in and out, but they're just going to tell you who's coming in and out there, or the fact that there's, X number of doors that are available for that grocery store. What really needs to happen is have full-time visibility of what's going on, not just in and out of the store, but kind of left and right. Are they going down the peanut butter aisle, or are they going to go over to the fruit section and grab all the bananas in the world? That kind of lateral movement also needs to be checked, and you need to be aware of it, because those are alternate paths that attackers can take to get at information that's very sensitive. As a technology advisor at Traceable, I'm a bit biased, and not just because, I work here, but also because this is technology that I found that was helping me do that in my past roles. The amount of information that you can glean from these APIs is not dissimilar from putting a tracking device on somebody's shoes when they go into the grocery store. You can actually see which direction they're going, what they're doing, where they're stopping, how long they're stopping there. And with that kind of visibility, even though it doesn't directly tell you exactly what's happening, you can glean a lot of information from that and use it to inform all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different ways that you can monitor traffic, see where there might be flaws in your business logic, see if traffic flow is optimized, see if there's choke points in your network or in your databases that are causing latency. For me, and I say this frequently, and it's one of the reasons that I get excited about this, if I look at the list of cybersecurity problems that I've been trying to solve for the last 10 years, it is eerily similar to the list of things that I can do with solid visibility into my API framework. And as a result, a good API detection and monitoring and response tool like Traceable basically has the potential to tick off down that list most of the things that need to happen. It just requires some maturity and process and some data science wizards basically to pull out all of that context. And so one of the things that we're working on at Traceable is kind of like figuring out how do we help our customers with the visibility they have, then make good decisions about what to do about that. For example, if, there's a website that I can think of right now that I'm not going to name where every 0.25 seconds, a call is being made to the front end login page, basically. Let's say that, it's going to the login screen and saying, okay, my email address is arellano@gmail.com, and then making that query. The system comes back and says, that's not a valid email address. Okay, cool. But also it just told me that that isn't. And then I add or change a different number or name to that email address string. And then it acknowledges, yes, that is a valid email address, but your password is wrong. Guess what? Now I have a long list of both customers and non-customers that can hit that website. I can bump that up against a known list of compromised passwords, and I can get in to a lot of different accounts. And so being able to see that, have the visibility that a certain endpoint is making those queries can help the detection and response teams stop that particular device or that particular IP from continuing to make those queries. And really, at the end of the day, it's what security people have been trying to do for the last 20 years. Understand what you have and then take action on the things that you own.
Well, Adam, I appreciate you being on the show today. You've illustrated what phantom threats are and how dangerous they are in the context of API security. We've gone through some real-world examples to really see some significant impact that they can have to the reputation of an organization and all those things. And I can tell Traceable is in the business of giving people visibility and being able to see what's happening in their API, which allows them the opportunity to make good decisions and secure their APIs. So Adam, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thanks for the conversation. And just remember, everybody, it's Halloween. Stay scary and get candy.
I love it. And this concludes Phantom Threats, the ghost haunting your API security with Adam Arellano. Stay tuned for more episodes in our series, The Haunted House of APIs. And if you'd like to learn more about Traceable, go to traceable.ai. That's traceable.ai. And thanks again for listening.